Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given by a doctor or a personal therapist. I'm your host, Jelon Johnson. My guest today is Jaime Mahler. Jaime is a licensed therapist who specializes in helping people unlearn generational trauma, toxic relationship cycles, and people pleasing. She's been featured on Bustle, USA Today. She's a podcast host, a speaker, and a mental health content creator with a huge social media following. Jaime is passionate about helping people learn to find their own voice, their own truth, and their authenticity. So Jaime, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm just ready to hit the ground running and share with you guys all your questions. Answer them all for you.
Cool. So I gave a bit of an introduction, but so that the audience can get to know you better, can you give a little bit of background about yourself and tell your story about who and why you are today?
Yeah, so I'll try to be a little bit, more succinct, but I have a lot going on right now, and it took me a long time to get here. So I grew up in a really large family, really, really religious. I had a lot of, hardships kind of growing up, and I always had an interest in psychology. It was kind of always in the back of my mind. I remember weirdly being fascinated by listening to people's stories, listening to people's minds, how they conceptualize things. Even as a kid, I always just really enjoyed listening to people. And then when I was older, I did my undergraduate work in mental health. My school had this interesting blend of social work and psychology, and they made a blended major, which was mental health and human services. So I got kind of a taste of both in undergrad. And so I graduated with a mental health undergraduate degree. And then I didn't go to grad school until actually my second, so I have 3 kids. My second was born. So I actually was not right into grad school. I actually went oh my God, however many years it was after, it was probably 6 or 7 years after. And I went for therapy. I went for mental health counseling. And once I did that, I really focused a lot on trauma work, and I did a lot of acute trauma work, a lot of acute crisis work. I worked out in the community as a crisis counselor. I worked in inpatient. I did, substance briefly. I kind of dabbled in a lot of acute, very severe mental health issues. And then, I eventually found my footing and I went private practice, and that's where you get the specialization. So I do a lot of trauma recovery. I do a lot of complex trauma work. We can talk about that if you guys have questions about that. I'm sure some other therapist has mentioned it on this podcast. But yeah, so I do a lot of complex trauma work. I do also a lot of people who are recovering from intense, harmful dynamics, toxic traits, narcissism, stuff like that. So I usually tell people that what it takes is a lot to untangle yourself from really intense relationships like that. So it can be intimate partners, it can be families, it can be a religious system. So with that being said, obviously I have my work cut out for me, but it's the best work I've ever done. So there I am. I'm here today.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I remember when I first started following you, I was just man, I love her content. It was just so real and raw. And when you agreed to do this with me, I was so excited to give you an opportunity to share your skill set on my platform. So thank you for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So excited.
So something that you do is you help your clients learn to find their own voice, their own truth, and their authenticity. Can you tell me what that looks like?
Yeah, so what's interesting is a lot of people are like, well, what's on the other side of just like recovery? And to me, that's the most beautiful part of my job is I get to kind of see people step into their own power for the first time in their life. You know, they start showing up to their life in their own individuality. They show up to their life with their own autonomy. And people might be like, well, what does that look like? And I mean, a lot of the times it looks like pain, you know, it looks like laying boundaries. It looks like realizing certain relationships aren't serving you or they're spiraling into a really harmful cycle, like stuff like that. So it's not roses and daisies, but it is a really beautiful thing to see people start realizing who they are, really, like who they are. And that's what I think I try to target with a lot of my clients. Everyone kind of is in a different part of their journey. Like there's, you know, a lot of people that are just untangling, you know, they are like, I don't know who I am and I'm not at that point yet. I kind of need to start at an earlier part of this journey, right? I can't skip ahead. But yeah, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of determination and allowance of pain that might not feel comfortable for a lot of people. And, you know, that's kind of one of the things I stand on. I say, you know, healing is not, it's not rainbows. It's not, you know, fluffy. It's actually probably one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. And it is why I look at everyone who's doing this work as incredibly brave, because to do this work means that you are being able to navigate really, really hard things, and you're doing it every day. You're waking up and you're doing it. So, yeah.
The work that you do with trauma, right? A lot of people, when they first start to hear about, you know, therapy or recovery or healing, they may look at trauma and think that it's not something that applies to them. But trauma is getting so much more light shed on it today. But at the same time, people are like, well, you know, I wasn't in a war or I wasn't in a major catastrophe or something like that. So I wanted you to explain kind of what trauma is and what it can be.
Sure. I mean, the issue is if you look at trauma on a spectrum, I try to explain to people that it is a spectrum. It's not a hierarchy. Okay. So it's not, we're going to place everything above. I mean, yes, of course, there are very intense traumatic moments in certain people's lives. And there are other things that you might not, you know, at first glance think, oh, that would shake my psyche up into like a commotion. Right. But I loved that quote. I don't know who the origin is, but it's like, you can drown in the ocean or you can drown in 3 feet of water. And that analogy is so important to remind yourself when you're doing this work, especially with trauma, is because that is a resounding, it's something I actually repeat constantly. I say it in my podcast, I say it to my clients, is I say, you need to understand that to place trauma in a hierarchy will give you almost an excuse to not take your pain seriously. Not going to take it seriously, right? Because there's always going to be someone hurting more. There's always going to be someone who, you know, I don't care. Maybe you are a combat vet, but there's always going to be someone that had a bloodier battle than you did, right? And so I'm like, even the people that we say are the ones that are like validly going to come back with trauma, they might even hold that hierarchy in their head. And they're like, well, my buddy went to that one and we know that one was worse. Right. And I go, I don't want to say, I feel like excuse is kind of like, I'm a little bit particular in my language, but like, I feel like sometimes that's a tension point. So I don't know if I'd say an excuse, but it is a justification to not validate your pain. Like it's almost like, oh, I shouldn't validate that event really hurt me because I didn't get, locked in a closet when I was 4 or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is what people do. They do the hierarchy. So when I give you the example of a spectrum, A spectrum is, we are looking at this, if we zoom out, right? We're looking at this as some people are going to have very overt, very obvious things that could be opportunities for the brain to experience trauma, right? They are the car accidents, the war, the neglect, the severe poverty, the, constant hunger, constant neglect, constant physical abuse, like all of those things that you're going to be like, oh, yeah, that's so obvious, right? And then why this becomes more tricky is that we have things that are on the other side of the spectrum, which are less obvious and less, they're less incidental. So what I mean by that is they're less like able to be pinpointed by like a one side, like one slotted event, if that makes sense, right? This person A over here, if you're looking at the screen, is, on my right, they had a very intense car accident, right? That's an incidental, like obvious point in their timeline of something that's, I'm not going to insert their trauma, but we could say maybe trauma came from that, right? Well, on the other side of the spectrum, when we start talking about what we call complex trauma, which is prolonged trauma for a long period of time in an environment that you can't escape from, which is typically families, religious like environments, war zone. Like, yes, you can have it in some of those intense like experiences. So we look at why this becomes now harder to see. Well, if person A's timeline starts at 0, right? And now we look at their timeline, we're like, okay, they had a chill childhood and the car accident happened when they were 22, right? And then there's this big red dot on their timeline, right? We're like, oh, that's the event, right? Well, over here, person B their timeline started at 0 too, but their timeline was literally like completely sprinkled all through their childhood, right? 2, 4, 7, 8, 10. Like there are so many things that happened, but they weren't big blowouts, right? They were, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on the book. Am I allowed to swear? I don't have to. I don't want to because I don't want to mark the E. I have a podcast, so I'm not going to swear. They are sprinkled with so much, okay, I'll like censor myself. Just so much pain and so much like under the radar interchanges. Okay, so this is what it's going to sound like. My entire childhood, I was told, this is me just making something up. It's not my real story. Okay. My entire childhood, I was told, you're a piece of crap. You're never going to amount to anything. You're a terrible human being. Get out of my face. I don't want to talk to you. Right? So now we have, how many times was that told to that person from age 0 to 17 before they left the house? I can't even count. How am I supposed to count that? Because that was literally integrated into their life probably at least 20 times a week, right? So how do we call that, right? Someone's not gonna be like, that's not my trauma. I don't know what you're talking, like, how could that be trauma, right? And I go, you were basically verbally deprecated 20 times a week for 17 years. But then what do they say to me? I didn't go to war. I didn't get in that car accident. And I go, right. It's not a hierarchy. It is a spectrum, right? So now when we have like a name for it, prolonged trauma in an experience that you can't escape, right? We can start calling trauma, and we can start identifying the untangling that needs to occur. Because if all of the sudden I realize, and I'm talking to my client now and they go, but Jaime, like I am a piece of crap. My brain goes, who told you that? Well, I don't even remember. I don't even know if someone told me that. I guess it's just always been in my brain. And I go, what was it like? Because remember, sometimes it's not even your parents. Sometimes this is a coach. Sometimes this is a religious pastor that kind of got into your head as a mentor or something. Sometimes this is like a friend, right? That just kind of stayed present and just literally harped hard on your psyche. And this is why people are like, well, everyone wants to blame my parents. And my parents were like amazing human beings. I'm like, good. I'm so glad you had great parents. We do not exist in a bubble. Did you do football for 10 years as a child? Yeah. Did you look at your coach like a dad? Yeah. Oh, did he call you a piece of crap every time you like literally tripped because your shoe was untied? Okay. How many times did you hear that? How many times did you think you were a piece of crap? How many times did you believe that you will never gonna amount to anything? You're never gonna be successful, right? Okay, so that's the way I try to describe it to people, is that like people really struggle with calling trauma, but I'm telling you, it's not, let's go on a witch hunt and find every single scenario. It is, what are some of the themes that came out from some of your role models? What are some of the things that people, what are some of the models of the relationships you had, right? What was it like growing up? What was it like being modeled in your early relationships? How did your first partners well, they're not really called partners when you're a kid, but like, how did your first, puppy love relationship feel like, right? Like, what was that like, right? And so people are like, they're very quick to dismiss that. They're like, oh, well, that's just, I was in like 11th grade. And like, I was dating him for like a year or two. And I'm like, you were in an incredibly psychologically formative time. And you spent time with a partner that basically, called you ugly every day? Like, what? How is that? How are we going to overlook that? How would that not be important to your formation of, let's say, the relationship you have your body, or maybe early sexuality, right? Like, how would that not impact you, right? So that's really why I harp on it, because I'm like, listen, it's not my role to insert trauma into your life. That is not my role, and I will never be okay with people who do that, because it's not okay. I'm not asking you to do a witch hunt. All I'm asking you to do is take a very big step back for a second and maybe get curious about certain things that were normalized that you're realizing now may have actually had implications.
That's great. Getting curious with the things that are normalized, right? Because I was the same way. It was like, well, I didn't have this or I didn't have that. I was looking at the spectrum. So things that were normal to me were traumatizing, especially at a young age and dealing with all the things that you mentioned. So thank you for putting emphasis on that. I think a lot of people can relate to that, and we'll be able to align with it, because when we normalize things, we don't really see how they can affect us. So being able to step back and look at those things and get curious and be like, well, maybe that was something that affected me or bothered me. Or for 10 years, I had a coach that berated me. You know what I'm saying? So thank you for that.
Right. For sure. Yes.
What are some symptoms of trauma that you see in some of your clients?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's hard is I don't like to completely differentiate like complex trauma versus like what we consider culturally as trauma. The only reason I would maybe summarize some of the differences when it comes to symptomology is, let's say someone with what we would consider a classic presentation of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, might present different than someone with complex trauma, or if they're actually meeting criteria for complex post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So when you talk about some symptoms, I obviously I'll like attempt, but like it's kind of nuanced when it comes to that, because we have almost a lot of this blending occurring where, like, let's say they went their whole childhood and then, mom got remarried and then the dad started like actually hurting them or something. Like, there were now multiple different symptomologies getting blended together. Like, there's actually the very like stark incidents that occurred and they remember when they were 14 and, the stepdad, hurt them or whatever. I don't want to like trigger the audience, but basically, when we're thinking about that blending with the complex trauma, it's going to look so interesting, right? Because we're going to have some of the like very intense reactions to maybe anyone, even like looking like they're going to be violent with you, right? You might get really activated, which to me, I might be like, well, you might not have had that if you didn't get threatened at 14, right? But with complex trauma, you could be developing almost like, this is why this is so hard. You're developing almost like more response related triggers. So for example, like defensiveness might be a sign where you feel as though you like you're never heard. You're never listened to. No one gives you the time of day. Like you can't trust anybody, right? When someone says, hey, why are you late? You immediately think they're attacking you, right? To me, that would be a good sign of being like, well, obviously someone never let you feel safe just running like 2 minutes behind. Maybe they berated you, right? So if we take the example of being late, okay? It's probably easier in examples, so let's just go with the example.
So,
you and me, like, I'm your bestie or something, and you run 5 minutes late to my party. And I genuinely am not attacking you, but I'm like, oh, hey, John, what happened? What's going on? What happened? Like, I see you're a couple minutes late. And you literally are like, really, Jamie? Really? You have to, what are you going to embarrass me in front of everybody? Like, why are you making me feel bad? I didn't, right? And there's like a lot of defensiveness. And I'm like shocked. I'm like, oh my God, Gillette, like, I'm just curious. Like, I just want to make sure you're okay. Like, was there like tire issue? Like, I was not asking that question to hurt you. I genuinely wanted to know if you were okay. Right. Well, why would that pique my interest if I was just observing this interaction as the therapist? I'd be so curious why you immediately were starting to get like very activated by that question, right? Like what would cause that level of activation in your brain if I was supposed to be like a safe person to you, right? And so my curiosity would come from, what was it like? Were you ever allowed to make mistakes? What was it like when you were late? What was it like when you spilled coffee? What was it like when you accidentally, forgot an event or something small? Like what was it literally like? Oh my gosh, you are so dumb. Like you're so dumb. Could you just like figure out like just something linked to deprecation or whatever? My brain would go, how many times did that happen to you? Because if that happened once, you're not going to develop that reaction. But if it happened every time something little happened in your life, like I was late because I didn't realize how long it's going to take to de-ice I don't even know if you're in a winter state, but I had to de-ice that's why I was 5 minutes late. I was de-icing my window, right? Well, if I'm your best friend, that's okay. You still have as much integrity to me if you're 5 minutes late versus if you were 5 minutes early. I'm not asking that question because I'm trying to hurt you. I'm just curious because I want to make sure everything's okay. Like if you need help with your car later, I can go help you. Like that kind of thing. Because I genuinely care, right? If that reaction, right, if you're asking like, what does some of the symptoms look like? They actually show up almost, I don't want to say exclusively because that's a little too definitive, but I would venture to say it's close to exclusively in interchanges with other people, in the interaction of the relationship, right? And so it's not, I don't want to speak definitively as though anytime you're defensive, you got to go find your complex trauma, somewhere. It's just that it shows up as lingering. This is how I phrase it. If my mom always equated spilling juice, being late, accidentally forgetting something as I am so dumb and I'm worthless and I'm good for nothing and I'm a terrible human being. I'm a terrible daughter, right? If that was like the theme coming out of some of this stuff, right? That narrative, which is like just a fancy name for a story in my brain, that storyline literally starts to generalize. Okay? And when that starts to generalize, it's not just my mom anymore. Anytime I am late, I am now terrified that you, like if we flip it and I'm the one late, that you're now going to think that I'm either stupid or I'm a bad friend or I'm good for nothing. And so immediately I have to go defensive and I have to be like, I'm not, you know, like I freak out, right? Well, we know you're safe. You might know I'm safe, but it doesn't matter to the psyche because the psyche developed a little bit of a lingering, like, you know, anchor point from a past relationship. So it's applying it generally to the current situation. So how do we work with that? It's like, damn, like, oh, sorry. Dang, we have to really work on untangling it because I have to look at you and realize you're safe and you have to look at me and realize I'm safe. And now I have to realize, oh, I'm not dumb. I'm just a human that didn't realize it iced over last night. That's it, right? So when you're asking about symptomology, in complex trauma, it's probably going to show up like that, like in a relational way, right? And then with like what we would consider culturally like trauma, like a car accident or like something more incidental, you might see more like connected to an event. So someone might be like, I don't want to drive right now because I had a car accident, right? So that's like it's almost like linked a little bit more to the incident. That's not like a definitive statement, but you'll see it more maybe like, I don't really feel safe driving, or I don't really trust people in cars anymore, or right. It can generalize too, but like same thing with what you hear with like vets and saying, I really, really struggle with like untangling fireworks in my brain with fire, like shots fired. Right. So that link is very like incidentally based. It's like linked to that environment that they were exposed to like trauma in. Right. Does this help a little?
I love it. Yes, yes. So much. I love how you brought up the point about how if you were constantly told you were dumb or you weren't good enough or, you know, whatever it was, if you spilled the milk, you know, and that now becomes generalized in your brain, it transfers over into everything that you do. And that, I think, was the explanation that I was looking for. And you did it so good. You did it really good.
Perfect.
Again, thank you. Something else that you specialize in is generational trauma, right? And one of your posts said, this was so good. I said, generational trauma is one of the hardest things to face because not only are you attempting to heal, but you're embedded in a system that fought to normalize the trauma. You're trying to heal in the wound that everyone pretends isn't there. Can you break that down, please?
Yeah, I mean, this one's hard too because I try to speak in a practical way. Even in my education channels, I try to not be too like one-sided. I want to make sure that I'm acknowledging that we are all human beings that want to be bonded with our families. We want to have close relationships with our siblings and our parents and our grandparents and our nieces and nephews and wherever you are in your walk of life, right? We want to have authentic relationships. We want to be bonded with people. So I struggle because that quote that you read that I, put together for people, it's hard because there's this dissonance or the rub, CA, if you ever listen to the podcast, she always calls it the rub. It's that dissonance and tension that comes up when you realize the system that I want so badly to be functional is not equipped right now. They don't have the right skill sets, or they're not able to access those skill sets. And by staying here in the exact same scenario without developing new skills or without developing new boundaries, I will not be able to access the healing I need to if I stay exactly where I am right now, right? And so I say this with nuance because that does not mean, please hear this, any of the listeners, that does not mean up and abandon your entire circle and never look at your family again. Like, I think that's where it gets dangerous is some people go very all or nothing and they're like, oh, well, my family reacts, so I'm just going to never talk to them again. And this is why when I say it's so nuanced, it is. There might be some families that it really isn't like it's the system is so deeply rooted in like trauma narratives that it really isn't able to be, you're not able to even be adjacent to them, right? While they're healing, because it is so dangerous for you to be that like that proximity being that close. It is not psychologically safe to be that close to them right now. That is not the like default though for people. I want everyone to understand that. It is a last resort for my clients. It is not something I present to them unless we have done a lot of work to try to untangle where or the extensiveness of the issue and how deeply embedded it is in the family, right? So it is not something I say lightly because I don't want people to have to figure out an entire new family system. I don't want them to feel abandoned. I don't want them to feel isolated, right? That being said, though, right at the end when I said you're trying to heal in a system that works to normalize that, that's where I would say, especially when we're doing this work as, not, like the teenagers or the early 20s where we're like embedded in it, but we actually are embedded in a way where we have our own kind of place, we have our own job, right? But we're still involved with our family, right? We visit them, they're in our lives, right? So it is an art form to literally ask yourself, what layer am I going to allow my family to have access to while I'm healing? Because you don't have to close the door completely. And I would venture to say the door might be a little too open. It might be a little too much access, right? There might be too much flow back and forth that you might need to take a step back to try to create a little bit of boundary, to try to create a little bit more autonomy, and to try to create a little more individuality, right? And what happens in that? That's not acceptable. That's looked at as a threat. You want to do your own thing? What do you mean you're not coming to the brunch? I kind of taken a step back. I'm going to kind of do something. I'm going to kind of create my own thing on Sunday. That's a threat, right? For many families, that's a threat. Why are you stepping out into your own, right? Why are you not aligning with the family that we just expected you to do that for the rest of your life? Right? So it's like, there's the tension points, right? It's like, they're going to be thrown off when all of a sudden you step into some of your own power and you step into your own individuality. So that one's tough because is it absolutely true that it's very difficult to heal in an environment where people refuse to honor your pain? Yes. And we're social creatures. Many people are like, the thought of just literally never talking to my family, that's also traumatizing. And yeah, let's validate that. It is traumatizing for someone to be told, okay, then just like never talk to them. And you're like, what? Okay, that's very intense. And even that thought, maybe I need to give up this work. I don't know if I want to do this anymore, if that's what you're telling me is required, right? So it takes a lot. It takes a lot to be like, how do we navigate the fence? Like, what do we do? Is the fence too wide right now? Do we bring it in a little bit? Do we like create a little bit more personal boundary while trying to maintain some sense of connection, right? And that's that like back and forth that a lot of my clients do. They'll be like, I tried to put up that boundary and my mom said that I was neglecting her. Like that, you see what I'm saying? Like those are the things that we're working on in the work that I do, is that we have to work on that interchange of like, what is the response? Hey, maybe your mom respects you and she says, oh, okay, that's fine. We'll find another day, right? It's okay. Right? Okay, that's the beginning. That's a good sign that they're like, oh, okay, you're going to step into your own individuality and I'm going to work around it.
That would be great if that always happened.
It
but
does not.
A lot of times. I think trying to have individuality can be perceived as a threat to the system, because the system has been where everyone finds protection for so long, right? Things have been done this way for such a long time, and nobody really wants to touch it because it's been done that way for so long. So the first person who comes in and says, okay, we don't need to do this anymore because this is what, Grandma Pam did in 1894 and it doesn't work anymore today. It's, well, who are you to disrespect Grandma Pam, So it is a lot of work. It's very hard. Trying to navigate, like you said, that dysfunction in the family systems. So thank you for doing such an excellent job explaining that. I wanted to talk about two kind of buzzwords that are popular right now. One is gaslighting, and you talk about that a lot. So I wanted to see if you could give kind of an explanation of what gaslighting is.
Yeah, I mean, the tricky part about gaslighting is I think that people are starting to use it I'm in a couple of different, holding the gray here, where I can understand where people who are deep in the narcissistic abuse recovery get a little perturbed when it's used a little bit loosely, right? Where people will be like, it's an abuse term, right? So using it lightly could degrade the word, right? I don't want to say the word, but degrade the meaning behind the word, right? But gaslighting also in my brain there is severe, intense, overt gaslighting. And then there's almost I guess we would call it the pretext or the preface to gaslighting. What's the prequel? What happens before gaslighting gets intense, right? What are the interchanges look like before gaslighting spirals into actually malignancy and incredibly problematic and incredibly manipulative, right? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. It's I think we're all talking about the same thing, but we're talking about levels of the way it's being utilized. So if people are asking, okay, well, what is gaslighting? It is, I say simply, it's in a simple way. If we're talking about emotional, in an emotional way, it is, I want to tell you how you feel and then convince you that that is the truth. Okay. So if you're let's just do the example, right? I'm talking to you, you're my partner. Okay. And I'm like, oh, what? So you're mad at me? And then you're like, no, I'm not mad. No, you're mad. I know you're mad. Don't pretend you're not. You are mad. I'm not. I'm standing here. I'm calm. I'm not mad. Nope. You are. That's exactly I see what I see. You're mad. You can't convince me otherwise. I'm with an angry boyfriend, right? And you're sitting there and you're like, am I actually mad? So this is where it gets messed up, right? Because you're like, am I actually mad? Is this what they consider me being mad looks like? I'm not. I'm calm. I'm trying to have a decent conversation, right? But now you have a girlfriend on the other side that's like, you're a monster. You're just super angry at me. And you're sitting here I don't know what you're seeing, Jamie, but I'm standing here just deeply breathing, trying to get through this discussion with you. And I'm just railing into it. I'm like, no, just I'm scared. What if you're going to get really angry? Like, cause that's what right. So why would that be considered gas? Well, what I'm trying to do is not only insert my own narrative over the situation, but now I'm trying to convince you that that's real, right? So on the flip side, when we not talk about emotions, but we talk about actions, this is where it gets really messed up, is I say something like you say, okay, let's do the boyfriend girlfriend interchange again. Okay. Right. And I go, I blatantly, like when we're passing in the kitchen, just like body, like what do they call it in football? Like I lower the shoulder, I like body slam you or whatever. Right. But we're walking past each other. Right. And you look at me and you're like, dude, Jamie, what was that about? And I look at you and I go, what was that about? Right? You're just like pointing if you're listening, like you're pointing between us. And I literally look at you and I go, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Right? And you're sitting there and you're like, my shoulder hurts because you just slammed into it. And you're going to stand there and say nothing just happened? Nothing did happen. Your shoulder's just sore because you probably were playing football with your guys last night. So some people will be like, that does not work. How do people start believing that didn't occur? And I go, it's amazing how like this gets so deep. It gets emotionally deep. It gets physically deep. I have worked with people. I'm not joking you. I have worked with people that have had to start writing down and documenting like things on their body because their partner would literally look at them and be like, you ran into the wall. That wasn't me. I saw you run into the wall. And they're like, I don't think I did though. I think this was when you like you were like really, really like mean the other day. And I remember you like smacking me when you like stood up. Like, that's the bruise. No, I saw you run into the wall. So, like, can this be an intense? Yes. That I'm giving you very intense examples of gaslighting because it is in its ultimate form. I'm distorting your reality. I am detaching myself from emotional and physical accountability, and I am distorting your reality, trying to let you frame your reality as though I am the good guy or good person, right? I'm not problematic. You're the one problematic. You're the one with the sore shoulder. You're the one with the clumsy foot. You're the one running into things, right? Okay, so then we have the smaller degree of gaslighting. Like, look at like medical gaslighting. This is like very like everyday medical gaslighting. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you in? Honestly, like I'm telling you, doctor, it's like, it's getting almost to be like a 9. Like I really am not doing well today. You look fine. You're good. Seen like 20 people today. You look exactly like everyone else. Could you see how that's a similar, it's like, sure. It's in relationship with the same line of thought. It's just presentation is so much lower key, right? It's very like dampened, right? So when people who have been told that their actual like bloody eye was caused from like a door hitting them, yeah, they might get a little upset when someone calls medical gaslighting saying like, oh, you're not in pain, right? But what we're not going to do is we're not going to put it on a hierarchy because you're not in competition with each other in how much pain you're in. Like, y'all both are having someone speak over your autonomy and someone speak over your authenticity. Those are both, they're just different sides of the spectrum. Like, you're not in competition with each other. What we need to do is talk about the precipitants, right? The doctors that are gaslighting you, the partners that are hurting you and not holding themselves accountable, right? So it's actually a very classic systematic trauma. This follows like almost like a formula. I mean, I'm not going to get into it because it's a little dorky, but if you think about systematic trauma, what is the best way to get people to not stay accountable for their actions is get them to infight. get them to fight against each other. So the person that said they experienced medical gaslighting and the person that experienced incredible problematic partner gaslighting, if they can get those two to fight, then no one's like the doctor's not problematic, and then the partner isn't problem, right? They're just fighting against whose trauma is worse, right? Sheesh. So if you can get infighting to occur, actually accountability decreases, which is why this is so problematic. And I tell people all the time, we are not fighting about whose trauma is the worst. We are trying to orient ourselves to the precipitants, everybody. Everyone look at the precipitants. Do not look at each other. Look at the precipitants.
The way you broke that down and even gave those examples, it makes it so clear and easy to see. And I think, it may be hard for someone to conceptualize that someone could get punched in the face or get, bumped on their shoulder and then be convinced that it didn't just happen, right? But if it's happening long enough, just like you talk about in childhood, when you have so many things that are sprinkled throughout it, those little traumas can eventually get you to a point where you don't believe yourself.
Exactly. 100%. 100%. Absolutely. And what I tell people is if you ever doubting that this can occur, look at the cultural systemic issues with our rewriting of history. Look at the very intense stories that were rewritten and not actually told how they went down, right? And so are we all getting a variation of this culturally? Yes, we all have. We've experienced this in some level, whether or not this was in your intimate partnerships. We've experienced this in our education system. Were people realizing that they were willfully perpetuating stories that were false and that they were trying to rewrite history and trying to get us to not believe what occurred? Maybe they didn't realize they were complicit in it, right? The nurse coming in refusing to give the medication doesn't realize she's complicit in the medical gaslighting, but she's just following orders, right? So when we look at the proof, it's like, okay, so why are people questioning if the Holocaust was real? Why are people questioning if slavery was as bad as it was? Why are people questioning that if there was that much oppression for women, right? I sit there and I go, well, the evidence is there. It's just who's rewriting the story and who's trying to draw accountability away from themselves. Right. And so now all we have to do is try to pull a fast one on people. And what do we have? Snap your fingers. And now we have people saying it wasn't that bad. You had it made. Oh, my God. You had a place to live. Oh, my God. You guys are inflating the numbers of how many people died. I don't know why you're acting like it was so bad. Right. And I sit there and I'm like, that's it. Systemically, that's what that looks like. So if you think it's happening not in systemic, wide, it is. Obviously, it's happening in the systemic wide. And people actually believe it, right? So if you propose, I didn't do that. My ancestors didn't do that. It wasn't that bad. I don't know what you're talking about, right? Now, all of a sudden, people are like, you're right. It wasn't that bad, was it? Oh my gosh, I don't know why we're even harping on this. Why do we need to educate people on this? Right? Now it becomes very problematic because now stories are now getting rewritten and people are not ever going to be held accountable for the horrors of the past. Right? And we're going to repeat history. So then now we go into the individual level. Someone questioning me, how do they actually not believe that these things are occurring? I'm like, give it enough time, give it enough, we call it flying monkeys in the narcissistic world, but you get enough people to also agree with you, right? Jamie, she's so clumsy, right? You've seen her fall all the time, right? Oh yeah, I've seen her fall a couple times. Yeah, you're right. She's super clumsy. Yeah. So if she comes out with the bruises, don't even freaking believe her. She's always clumsy. Right. So now you get the community, you get the environment to be you're right. She is freaking clumsy. She's allowed to have bruises. So then it doesn't matter what you say because you're I don't think I'm that clumsy enough to wake up with this many bruises.
But you've been convinced otherwise.
Yeah, we can move on. But it's just it gets really intense. It gets really intense. So.
Well, we talked about this and how, almost every question could have been an episode in and of itself. So, But
this is correct.
yeah, this has been great though. I mean, what we did cover, I feel like it was amazing, and the way you broke things down was so good, which is why I was so happy to share this space with you and let you show what you can do and put your skill set on display. So
yeah.
But
absolutely.
last question. If you could use your platform to encourage anyone who might be struggling or on the fence with therapy or talking to someone about their feelings or big emotions, what would you say?
I would say that you deserve to live the most authentic version of yourself. And in order to tap into who that is, it's going to take a lot of work. So when I talk to people and when I ask them, what do you want? A lot of people will say, I just kind of want to know who I am. I want to know who I am without a boyfriend or a partner or a mom talking over me or I just want to know who I am. And I'm like, you deserve that. You deserve authentic, autonomous living. And to get that, you have to untangle all the lingering narratives that got talked over you and all the voices that got integrated. And you have to somehow decipher which ones are mine, which voices are mine. What do I believe? What are the things that I integrated? And if I did integrate that I wasn't worth anything, do I actually believe that? Do I really believe that? And at the end of the day, if you're like, I know I'm not worthless, what I would say is fight for the person you want to become then. Because you know you aren't. So you already have it inside of you. You know you aren't. So untangling is the work to get to that person.
Oh, that was beautiful. Great advice. I felt all the feels with that one. So I just want to say thank you so much for this, for your time, for agreeing to do this with me, for sharing your knowledge. And if people are listening and they want to look you up online or on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on most socials. I think I'm on almost every one of them at Recollected Self. I also have my podcast if you want to do any of this untangling, where we start talking about the skills and strategies. Unlearned is the podcast. You can find it anywhere. And then we're also just starting a workshop series. So our first workshop, if you want to start looking into that, we are starting our first workshop in the series is how to relate to the mother who has no boundaries. So we are framing that for people who, it's not just mothers. We just said the mom, but it's for anyone who had a adult or a care provider in their life that really had no boundaries. So we developed a workshop around that. And then lastly, if you really want to dive deep, my book is available for pre-order, and it's not going to be out until later this summer, but it's available for pre-order, and it's called Toxic Relationship Recovery. So you can basically search online, Toxic Relationship Recovery, Jaime Mahler, and you'll find the book available for pre-order. So if you want that, go ahead and order it. Because it's going to be available sooner than later. Everyone's like, oh God, it's going to be a month. I'm like, nope, you'll get a blink and it'll be there. So yeah, that's just a few ways that people can connect with me.
Cool beans. Well, again, thank you so much for this. Thank you for what you do, the way you do it, and for who you are.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate you.